Welcome to the Better Together podcast, where we look for ways we can work together to more effectively serve the Lord. Today we have with us Sean Warren. He is a pastor at Redemption Church, where he works with the various communities there out in Gilbert, Arizona. He's also got kind of a photography thing that he does on the side. We may have to ask him about that at some point. But Sean, thank you for joining us today, my friend.
Oh man, it's a real pleasure. So I was excited whenever you reached out.
Well, when I read this article, I said I have got to talk to Sean. It's so important, and it's something that we really need. So there's an article in one magazine. It's the August-September edition. I encourage folks to take it, to read it, and it's called Politics and the Art of Not Throwing Shade on the Gospel. And so, Sean, you talked about an event. It's an athletic event, really, and going along, and it's a Christian school playing it sounded like maybe a magnet school or even a charter school, and the folks not on the Christian school, they weren't believers, but they sure did get some feelings about believers from that interaction, didn't they?
Oh, I'll tell you, it's the school that my oldest two daughters have attended is it's an all honors school, and so it's not really big, but it's been the public schools' response to the charter schools out here. So it's a public school, but it's pretty rigorous on the academic side, and consequently, we usually get crushed in our sports, but that's okay. It kind of reminds me of the Vandy cheer that they used to do when they would play UT. That's all right. That's okay. We're going to be your boss someday.
Yeah.
I don't know how accurate that is anymore, but this particular time we went across town to play this Christian school, larger Christian school in the Valley. And before even the game started, one of their students prayed. And I can remember thinking, how do the atheist, Hindu, Mormon, and other students that my daughter plays basketball with, how are they perceiving all of this? Mm-hmm. And so the student prayed something about prayer and protection, let our actions be honoring to God. And as the game went on, it devolved into just something that wasn't good. And the man who I had for a couple of years now been, working on sharing the gospel with, living life with him, as we walked out, he just said, and they call themselves a Christian school.
Yeah.
And he had an edge to that. There was condemnation in that. And that was kind of the thing that got me rolling in this direction, writing about it. So from there, you try to make excuses for behavior, right?
Yeah.
And that excuses is, maybe that particular game that they played us, they were, it just was one of those fluke times. And they came back to our house and they doubled down on it, pressed us the entire game, never took their starters out. They're killing us by 30 to 40 points. Their fans are taunting ours. And it reached critical mass in my soul. And so when the second game went to start for the day, their coach came and sat down in the bleachers. So I just walked over and just engaged him and said, hey, I was making the assumption he's teaching at a Christian school, coaching. Are you a Christian? I feel like that's reasonable. And so he said yes. And I said, well, I just want to inform you of something that I believe is being interpreted probably not the way that you want it to. Mm-hmm. And when I finally got to the point where I talked to him about my friend who had said, and they call themselves a Christian school, you could just see it kind of wash over him. Like, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not what we're wanting to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So number one, it's a good thing you approached him with that, because he had no idea probably, or didn't think of it in that way.
No, he seemed to be absolutely, he had what I would say, zero situational awareness to what was going on. He was running his plan, doing his thing, while an unbelieving world was watching.
Yes. And so one of the lessons I think you lay out is always remember and always think about, our behaviors, what we do, how they look toward outsiders. And sometimes we as Christians can kind of be in a cocoon and forget how that is, I suppose.
Well, I think so for sure. I have intentionally, with social media, I mean, for all of the ills that there are with social media,
Mm-hmm.
to the thinking person, to the conscientious and intentional believer, it can also be a very wonderful thing too. I'm not a person that exclusively chucks it under the bus, but we have to be thinking that through. And just the other day, I was talking to a believer, a friend of mine came up, and he's a firefighter.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I just want you to know the other day, I blocked a ton of people off my social media except for you. And he named a couple other people he likes. He goes, I got rid of a ton of people.
Mm.
And I said, well, I don't think that's good. He said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, you have eliminated every voice that's different from yours. You were only exclusively hearing people that you almost totally agree with.
Mm-hmm.
I said, keeping those other people around makes you have patience, creates humility in you. It also gives you a look at another person's worldview. And I think in turn, it makes us just better witnesses of the gospel.
Mm-hmm. Excellent.
But out of our own flesh, it's easy to say, I don't want anybody around me that's like this. Just turn them all off.
Yeah.
So,
And so you can use social media that way. We can definitely know what other people think, other sides of stories and so forth. And then we probably need to be super careful about our own social media,
absolutely.
especially in this political season. It's offensive. The gospel's offensive enough without offending them over our politics or
Yes.
our idiosyncrasies. So you approach this fellow, this brother probably, and you shared with him. It kind of was it was something that awakened him. What are things, for the rest of us as we go throughout, and especially as we think of November's coming, so that's a good opportunity for offending people there.
Right. Well, for one, I think sometimes we act as if, I think in some ways, Eddie, what we have done is we've allowed politics to take a messianic position in things.
Mm-hmm.
And we've attached our gospel to politicians. If we vote the right person in, these things will happen. Now, I'm not saying we don't vote for what we believe our conscience will be right, but my hope is never in a politician. Mm-hmm. And I have a friend here on staff that I minister with, and he has two sons who both have cystic fibrosis. Horrible, absolutely horrible disease. And he, as you can imagine, takes a little bit of a different view about healthcare. He takes a different view on some things that he feels like just legislatively should be different. Well, I don't attach a morality to his position on that. I'm not saying that there's not positions that there are attachments of morality to, but he has really informed me on different positions. And he said something, and I quoted it in the article, and I'd just love to run to it right here, that I thought was so good. He had 5 things that he felt like for kind of the political season to remind us of. And one of them was, all of life is all for Jesus, even my political life. The second one is, the right thing is always worth fighting for, but never with the wrong weapons, which I think a lot of times that's very applicable. Mm-hmm. 3, feel free to disagree, but never dehumanize. 4, my team is rarely as virtuous as I want them to be, and their team is rarely as monstrous as I claim them to be. And then 5, there is no king but Jesus, and he hasn't endorsed my candidate. And I feel like those are those are really good points. And I have felt like, Eddie, even more, especially, when I initially wrote the article, COVID wasn't what COVID is now.
Right.
And I really feel the role for the Christians as a role of peacemaker as well during this time. The last thing I want to be seen as a person that is bombastic and that is angry and angst and that is so geared up. For one, I just don't see Jesus worrying about this at the same level some people are worrying about it. If he's in control, he's in control. If God establishes our rulers, then nothing's going to take him by surprise. And it would probably do my blood pressure a little bit better to just back down a hair and say, you know what? The King of Kings has all of this. And we're called to be citizens. We are citizens of heaven. And that's the thing that I felt a conflict with is I have people all the time who forward me messages to listen to, videos, good Christian folk.
Yeah.
But it's political messages. They're not forwarding me Christian, thought out worldview analysis and thoughts about this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting if your dialogue is dominated by the politics, and then every now and then you just throw a verse in there, maybe, well, then I would say you're out of balance. I'm not saying you're a bad person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying you probably are viewing this a little bit too much on earth and not as much part of the kingdom that we're going to.
That's great. And we sure do have a lot of examples in the scripture of, God working through imperfect leaders, God working in some pretty bad situations. And I mean, you even think about the Apostle Paul telling us to pray for a fellow that's probably ended up ultimately having him executed. So,
Well, and along that line, the other day I was thinking of when David and his strong man sneak into the camp and the spear's right by Saul's head. Mm-hmm. There was a respect for what God had established. Mm-hmm. And there was, because of that respect, there was also a peace in that circumstance. I don't have to take it. And I think sometimes we just feel like too much depends on us.
Yes. Yeah.
And so then I feel this angst and I feel all of this tension inside me because if I don't do it, then it's just going to be cataclysmic. And here comes the domino effect. And, God wants to use me, wants to use us, but he's got this.
He's got this. We're just, we're a tool, we're an instrument, and we want to be salt and light, and we don't want to get in the way. And really, I mean, that's what you shared with us in the article. Ways we can do that. We encourage folks to go to the article and also look at what you talked about with the whole social media business. We could do a whole podcast on that, but to remember, folks are looking, folks are seeing, and we don't need to turn them off with that or anything else when we're trying to the gospel.
Absolutely. And, probably one of the people that are most a significant lightning rod, obviously we have the president who's a lightning rod, and we have any number of other politicians, but just recently, AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, everybody has an opinion about her. And I listened to a podcast the other day, and it was one that I knew going into it, it was going to be way over in this direction. But something I found fascinating, what I found fascinating is that her Pentecostal grandmother in Puerto Rico influenced her a lot. Now, obviously, I don't know where that went. I don't know where she is with Jesus, right? But it got me thinking, okay, she's had some element of a Christian worldview. She's had some taste at some level, and it came out in this thing. That had me think back. Whenever I said in the article, my church sent me to D.C. to do some lobbying on behalf of a policy that George W. Bush had for funding for the Global Fund, which was really the poorest of the poor people in the world. And it was us still being involved with that. And while I was there, at one point in the distance, I saw Marco Rubio walking past, and he had his phone on, and he was texting somebody. And in that moment, just observing him, I thought, he has a wife, he has kids, he has concerns that are so beyond the political side of things. Mm-hmm. That's just, he's a human.
Yeah,
he's a human, and I think I forget that. And whenever we don't see somebody as human, well, then it allows us to just pull out all the flaming arrows and darts and go at somebody. But when you think, they are image bearers of God. Yeah. And I owe respect. I don't care who they are. I owe at the very foundational level respect to their creator. Yeah. And then to them. And so I don't think any of us can ever go wrong in leading with humility towards those we most disagree with, and even those who are the most strident. Mm-hmm. I think an uncommon humility in the midst of these times where things are going, people say, that's different.
Right.
What's that about? I don't see that much. And I think that's what helps us be a people who are unique.
That's great. Yeah. So that's who we're called to be. The Daniels, you see it in the Apostle Paul. You see it, Jesus. Mm-hmm. you see it everywhere. And so when we are those people, it gives us the opportunity and keep in the back of our mind, or maybe in the forefront even, that is the image bearer of the Lord. And they have trouble too. And that puts us in a position to be able to help them and point them toward the gospel. Well, thank you, Sean. Thank you for sharing the article, for taking the time to put this together and write it and let us publish it.
It was my pleasure. And Eddie, I would be remiss if I didn't say this. We will always have Havana Cuba together.
We will.
I know you probably haven't had an occasion to have a full-size bed that was shared with a heart comforter that was on it with a lot of people. And we'll
always have that.
We'll always have Havana. We'll always have Havana. And I don't know how, it was amazing to me that you got Chuck Liddell, or not Chuck Liddell, you got Mike Liddell, to My Pillow Guy, to sponsor your podcast now, along with Roslyn Capital. That's pretty amazing to me.
I just worked it out. So we should tell people our last night in Cuba was in the honeymoon suite of not a hotel, an apartment. It was quite the blessing. It was a honeymoon suite. And if my memory is correct, we got out of there so quick. Did we get the coffee they had made for us?
I don't think we got the coffee. Oh my goodness.
Then we learned later for our listeners that was part of the deal. They had coffee for us and everything. And oh man, I've been back to not that apartment, but one next to it, Sean. And I always remember they've got that suite over there, buddy.
They do. And I just want to say too, before I jump off here, Eddie, I was so encouraged and pleased when I heard that you were tapped on the shoulder, because I believe you're a person of integrity, of intellect, of character, and that you try to balance and walk through the hard things. And to me, we need so many more people like you. And I look forward to seeing how God uses you. And my heart is always very close with what's happening with my Frugal Baptist brothers and sisters. And I just want you to know you got my full respect and appreciation.
Oh man, Sean, I appreciate it. We love you, and we watch you from afar and think about you all the time. But thank you, brother, and keep praying for us. We're so proud of you, and we're praying for you too. And man, we'll just have to connect again soon.
Sounds good.
You take care, brother.
Yep, you too.